Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks once again for joining for this Startup Essentials program. It is my pleasure to introduce Ranga Reddy Indupuri, a CEO and founder of Maveric Systems. Ranga completed his engineering from Anna University and then jumped to do his management in human resources, PM&IR as it was known then, from XLRI Jamshedpur, where he and I were classmates in 1986 to 88. So Ranga brings technology with a human touch, I would say. He started his professional career with Apollo Hospitals before moving on to iShare and Proact Consulting to found Maveric Systems in 2000, providing software testing services for banking and financial sectors. Maveric has gone from strength to strength from what I can make out, with over 3,000 employees today and a global presence in 15 countries, I think, unless that has changed. And it also has an excellent track record of human relations. And if there's anyone we can learn talent management from, I would say none better than Ranga. So, and Ranga has been thoughtful enough to include Sri Muraleedhar Pai. I think the first time I'm meeting him online, probably. Hi, Murali.
Thanks.
Nice to have you here as a co-speaker.
Yep, thank you.
I understand that you're a hands-on technologist and have guided many startups to build and scale. So, so let's look forward to an engaging session today. And I would request all of you to ask all your questions.
Yep.
Because I am sensing talent management and retention as one of the biggest challenges faced by startups today. Over to you, Ranga.
The way we structured this evening is to share very briefly our experience, mine from Maveric and Murali's from many other tech startups, 15 minutes each, followed by some kind of a summary in terms of what is it that worked for us, and then leave open the session for Q&A. So that's the kind of format that we have. See, my own experience was that, there was an aspiration to begin with more than an idea. There was an aspiration to do something other than just being employed. So many a times that aspiration by itself is not sufficient to gather sufficient core team to do something. So many a times when you start thinking of venturing out, I think it's more an aspiration that comes in with or without a very concrete plan in terms of what is it that we're going to do. And some people venture out even before having that clear idea, and then probably spend quite a bit of time to figure out what is the idea. Some people actually are prudent in terms of really getting a reasonable sense of the idea and then subsequently committing to it. So the first thing is aspiration, good, not sufficient. The second thing is aspiration along with somewhat what you call examined idea rather than an idea that's not been fully examined, an idea that has been vetted out in a decent format, not only by you, but by a couple of others who have a reasonable sense of the idea you're talking about. And many a times this idea needs to be interpreted from the angle of how is it serving a particular problem or how is it serving a particular customer. Many a times, ideas do come into the mind, but you get excited with it without really asking the question, whom does it serve? And in which way does it actually add value to that particular set of customers or a type of customer? So the idea that actually moves from a stage of, some figurative sense to that of a value to a particular set of people is something that I would really consider as something that has been vetted out. Then comes, how do I actually move from that idea stage to actually creating that value to the customer? Some people try to do it all by themselves. Some people actually take a pause and say, which is a 3 or 4 member team that is more apt to actually engage with that idea and convert into a customer value. Many a times I see, most of the ventures with one more than equal leader with what you call lesser mortals around. And I also see in some startups wherein there are at least 2 or 3 people who are having an ability to contribute equally, if not on the same dimension, but on multiple dimensions, different dimensions. So I've seen both kind of situations well within my own experience with Maveric. And I've also seen situations wherein some people came and told me, why do you need 4 guys of the same caliber when you're even not looking at a 20 crore revenue, So from that angle, there are some who actually gather the team first and then subsequently get the idea to be converted into a customer value. There are others who actually start off by creating some customer value by converting or working on the idea, and then gather a team that would actually lift it further. Both options are open, but sometimes if you're lucky to get the team together, I find that to be more valuable than the idea, because the idea may work, may not work. The value that you created for a given set of customers may be temporary. Somebody else may actually come and actually give a value far different from that of yours. So from that angle, how do you give value to the idea, and how do you give value to the core team that can actually look at creating customer value is $1 million question. And many of us have a predicament there, and especially some entrepreneurs also look at that ownership of the stock to be something that they wouldn't like to dilute till the end. So from that angle, that teaming is something that many people struggle with. Do I do it before I really have a proven customer value, or before I actually have a set of customers, or do I do it early? Is a $1 million question. And most of us actually have a lot of hesitation in getting others to own the company as compared to wanting others to own the idea and work. So to that extent there, I think being generous is my outlook, but different people have different outlooks there. Once the idea starts creating customer value, I also heard that this team that has been invited, like when I was talking to Nandu, he said that most of these startups that we incubate are deep tech startups. Basically, tech strength is what is there with these leaders of the startup. So the minute you actually created, you took a service or a product, you looked at the market, you saw whether if it is a particular product or service that is not there at all. So if you are actually creating a new value, or it is there, some others are offering that particular product or service, but the way you are conceptualizing the delivery is going to add a lot more convenience to the customer. So it is either that you're original value, or there are others creating the value, but only thing is the kind of technology or the delivery model or a service model that you have is taking the pain away from the customer. Thus, you create more value as compared to other competition. Both scenarios, the minute you have a value that is perceived by the customer, the next game is actually gaining the customers or adding to the list of customers who would actually experience the value you are creating. So that is like actually having your what you call reference customers. And the reference customers in different industries vary in terms of what is it that when you have how many sites or how many users do you actually say that you are actually moved from just creating some kind of a customer value to actually creating what I call as economic value. That is, service viability is there on the day one. Now, by adding some 10 customers who are using this, I'm actually moving from service viability to that of actually business viability. There are a lot of places wherein services are viable. There are niche services. I'll give you an example. One of my friends from Excel, he actually wanted to get into outdoor advertising, and he created a particular advertising board in the Delhi Metro, wherein when the train moves along in the tunnel, advertisements run along with you. So it is something like it is a space which is never used for advertising, and there's a lot of novelty value there. But the only thing is that, it had a service value, or otherwise it really had a value as a service. But when it came down to actually the business value, whether it is scalable or is it something that he can actually do with multiple customers, because the setup time for putting one advertisement onto that electronic board was actually so enormous, setup cost was so enormous, so it never had a business value. It had definitely a value for the customer, but for the business, it was not viable at all, and they had to wind it up. So from establishing your, what do you call, your service value or customer value to business value is the second step in any enterprise. And the competency required here is not only technical, but to a large extent managerial. It's not just what your product does. How is it that your product is being built? How is it is actually, what are the logistics involved? What is the installation dynamics involved? Subsequently, what are the commercial arrangements that are involved? All these things actually add up and either lift your product or service up or really drag it down. So in the stage 2, tech is one side, commercial is on the other side, customer servicing or customer management is another one. So you get into actually having a need for multiple competencies. You need a sales competency, you need a delivery or customer service competency, you need a commercial competency at the minimum, other than your product development competency. This is where I see many of the startups getting into some kind of a stretch, because when people come from different spheres of life, for example, Nandu introduced me as IITMIC student of 86, 88. And Nandu is a business management student of 96, 98. By virtue of our own education, and more importantly, the subsequent experience, we think differently. We think differently. Like Murali being an IISc background person, and after that working largely on data technology, he thinks differently. So that's where we get into kind of a trouble, you know. That's where we normally get into trouble. One second, please. That's where we get into trouble. So many a times, the minute you are actually through with the product having a value for the customer, the second thing that comes is in terms of how is it that's going to create an enterprise value or a business value. And in order to create business value, you need more than, you know, the core technology or whichever be the sphere of your service. You need a commercial sense, you need a sales sense, you need a customer management or customer servicing sense. Now, there are at least 4 fields there, you know, product development or product engineering guys, the commercial guys, the sales guys, and then subsequently the delivery guys. And how is it that you're in a position to get 4 of them not to drag the idea based on their own perspective, rather build a common perspective is $1 million question. And that actually helps the customer value proven service to actually become something that can actually deliver enterprise value. Imagine that you succeeded in creating enterprise value. The proof of enterprise value is that you're in a position to add customers. There are many people who have 1 or 2 customers and after that find it almost impossible to add on to the customers. Add on to the customers. So if you're hitting that, it means that, you know, you need to re-examine the kind of service that you're actually having. And many a times it is an iterative process. It's not that, I mean, Maveric to begin with, we never started with the final service that gave us a breakthrough. We worked on many ideas between 2000 and 2003, and maybe end of 2003 is when we actually struck upon the right service, which had decent degree of acceptance, which subsequently was picked up by multiple customers, and then subsequently got into some kind of an acceptance, not only in the domestic market, but also in the global market. So from that angle, the second phase is the critical phase, and that's where you prove enterprise value. Then comes the third phase, which is actually what we call as a scale-up phase. And many a times we think scale-up is only one-dimensional, that is the dimension of adding more and more customers, going from regional to national. So that's when you actually are going to scale. When you scale, you not only scale with regard to your, you know, market reach, you also scale services. For example, we started off with a single service and we worked only on one service for almost 16 years. And it requires quite a bit of patience and quite a bit of courage not to really scale before you are ready. So 16 years, we had a single service. And in 16 years, we probably built just about somewhere in the range of about less than $30 million revenue. In the next 4 years, we actually built $70 million revenue by adding 3 more services. So you not only scale one service's outreach, but you also scale multiple services because you already have a customer base. Using that customer base, or by studying the customer base for a period of time, you know what else can you actually, what other problems can you solve for the same set of customers. So to that extent, in scaling, there is a scaling of services. Thus, you are maximizing customer value by adding one service after another. And apart from that, you are also moving from a set of customers, a category of customers, to another category of customer. Or well within the same category, you are having a far better reach from regional to national, national to global kind of a reach. One mistake I see many people doing here is that they actually jump quite a bit with regard to the type of service or category of customer. Basically, they make a mistake in terms of assuming that customer is also similar to the kind of customer that I had. So be very careful in actually moving in the product category or your customer category. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying that don't think that all customers or all category of customers are similar. Each one of them will have a unique challenge, or they would have a very different way of looking at commercials. They could also be having a very different way of looking at acceptance. Acceptance means your own selection process, vendor selection process. Like, for example, for 17 years, we never looked at global banks because the kind of selection criteria for a global bank to select a IT service provider was far more stringent as compared to regional leaders. So the minute we focused on regional leaders, there was a lot of success. But if we were really going behind the global leading banks, we would have definitely not faced the similar success. So we waited till such time our own enterprise characteristic was matching the selection process of a global bank, and then subsequently looked at them as a customer category rather than looking at them earlier and then facing some sort of a failure. So this is the 3 stages, I would say. In the stage 1, you are actually establishing customer value. In the second stage, you are actually establishing enterprise value. In the third stage, after establishing enterprise value, you are actually moving into actually giving scale to both the kind of services that you have, as well as scale to the kind of customer outreach that you have. And with that, you should probably come to a situation wherein that you are in a position to institutionalize the process of looking at what problems customers have, how do I experiment and establish some sort of a service market fit, then move it from there to like what you call as a service value or customer value to enterprise value to scale. So this is broadly the kind of experience I've gone through, and I've taken 20 full years for that. There are a lot of youngsters these days who actually do that in 3 to 5 years. So from that angle, I've learned it slow, and I'm sure that some of you would actually be learning it much faster. But in any case, it's a very, very involving job. And as an entrepreneur, aspiration is on one side, reflection is on the other side. How is it that I am in a position to understand the surrounding and then assimilate a particular sense out of it and use that sense to actually create a kind of a value to the customer is the whole game. So now I also heard some questions when I was interacting with the team which arranged this call that was primarily related to people side. So now let me talk about a few things that I've learned with regard to the people side. In the beginning, the idea or the passion of the core team is the only asset we have. We neither have a proven service, we neither have a long list of customers to talk about, and I'm certain at the beginning we won't even have a cash flow, so to say. So in the very early stages, that is actually when you're trying to actually get the service market fit, the only thing that inspires anybody to come and join us in our own quest to create value is our own, what you call, outlook as a leader, and more importantly, the kind of passion that I bring to work. And the third thing, if I may add, how are you perceived with regard to sharing credit, with regard to sharing some kind of a, what you call, financial gains, and maybe at a point of time even sharing ownership, so sharing credit is something that everybody would look for on the day one more than anything else. So how generous are you with regard to sharing credit? How generous are you with regard to at least being understood as a person who would probably at a point of time when there is financial success would share financial what you call gains, and then at a later point of time. So the first stage, I think, your passion and your own outlook as a leader, and more importantly, your generosity with regard to sharing credit, sharing if and when there is a financial success, sharing that, and then probably sharing some sort of ownership would be what people will be looking at, number one. Number two, when you get into what we call as the moving from service viability to enterprise viability, that is when you're actually trying to actually create enterprise value, there I think your strength is in terms of how do you appreciate other competencies. Because many a times, I don't know how many of you look at marketing as a value creating function. Many entrepreneurs think that marketing is all humbug. We spend a lot of money, but there is no clear definition or clear return on investment there. So unless otherwise there is a clear return on investment, I don't want to spend a penny. Similarly, you yourself as an entrepreneur, in a very loose manner, when you're actually having a coffee with some colleagues, will say, these sales guys, they talk a lot. So you're basically saying that I don't respect sales. Or at the same time, as an entrepreneur, you might say, this finance department guys, they are so tight-fisted. And you're the leader and you're telling that, finance guys are tight-fisted. At the same time, finance is there in order to make sure that you don't run into, working capital issues or liquidity issues. So how you actually respect various functions, and then you're in a position to get the best out of them and integrate them, because a finance guy and the sales guy may not integrate on their own. You need to integrate as an entrepreneur people who are otherwise not given to work together. So number one, appreciate multiple competencies or multiple functional competencies, and more importantly, don't ever expect that these functions will work with each other on their own. There is an enormous task of integrating them, getting them to see the point in a common way, aligning them to the overall how rather than aligning them why. Everybody knows why, but how is where all of us fail to collaborate with each other, because I have a different way of looking at how to do it, and probably my colleague has a different way or different experience that tells him that this is the best way to do it. And one of the things, especially in that commercial viability phase, that I have used is everybody comes and says and I say or. What I mean by that is they'll say, Ranga, do you want it done faster or cheaper? Well, only one is going to work. You can't have it fast and also cheap. Ranga, do you want it done best? Then don't bother about budget. So I keep telling them, there is nothing like or. There is always and. It is not possible to actually be unidimensional. You need to always have the opposites you need to still manage, at a lower cost, a higher impact. So that and business is something that I always promoted, especially when companies are trying to actually get their enterprise viability angle. Get out of or and you tell your team that it is and if you have to be really be influencing them, I think 80% of your time should go with your leaders, influencing them, and your customers. Nothing else is something that you should be bothered about, especially in creating economic viability for the firm. Then comes scale. Scale usually requires altogether a different operating principle. And usually in scale, the biggest problem is the original creators find themselves almost in some kind of nostalgia. There's a big problem in scale. The people who have actually been there, who created, the customer value, then subsequently enterprise value, by the time when it comes to scale, many of these original promoters or the core team who worked along with the promoters starts looking back and actually saying, those days it used to be more fun. That's the biggest hindrance that you have for scale. That's the biggest hindrance that you have for scale, because it basically tells, those people are creators. They are not the scale players. So there is a big struggle between these two teams, a team that you are trying to put together, which has an outlook for scale, and another team that actually created the whole viability, brought the firm so far, and is now actually put it in a right place wherein scaling both on the service side and customer side is viable, and it is very, what you call, promising. So these two teams actually are to be managed in a way that they don't become a block for each other. So that's the third complexity that you will face when you actually come into the scaling phase. And that's when I think many of the core team members need to actually grow up mentally to begin with, and if possible, professionally also, and become more of client ambassadors rather than, business managers or, operational people. Because by virtue of being there in the system, creating, that customer value and then enterprise value, and then bringing it to a situation where scale is highly viable or highly possible, if they continue to be there, scaling becomes difficult, and thus they need to probably take up new portfolio of work. In my opinion, the best is that they actually become, the custodian of the customer, or they actually become, people who advocate customer needs internally. They become customers, or they become the voice of the customer, rather than trying to be operational in nature. Or at the same time, we can also think of them, actually, some of them could actually prove to be good even in scale, but some of them, or maybe 30% of them. So this is how I've experienced these three stages. I've taken almost 20 years to go through these three stages. And now I stop here, and I'll keep more time for questions, wherein I can actually think of answering more people-related questions as and when the Q&A session starts. Murali, over to you to share your experience.
Thanks, Ranga. Thanks, Nandakumar, to invite me into this chat, and thanks for all of you for attending. I was interestingly, though I've started working with Ranga for around 3 years now. I was just going through the notes which I prepared and what Ranga was speaking about his journey. Can you hear me? Okay. So no, I completely agree with all the points which Ranga was talking about, and in my journey, which was primarily quasi-entrepreneur, in the sense that I was not part of the starting team, but the next team in most of these places, and working primarily into creating products out of either existing ideas or existing services businesses, and why products also is one way to scale, and one way to standardize, and one way to ensure that you can reach to more people. So for one, we built an information platform for e-brokerages, which was at one point, this was in, started working on it in 1997, and initially went through multiple changes, and I will relate to what Ranga was talking about, in the sense that we started off, or the company started off as a few passionate people got out of credit rating agency called CRISIL, and wanted to establish a value proposition around wealth management and investment research. And it was my first job almost, and I joined and to do the valuation, and then I realized that the information vending itself can be a large business. And while doing that, so at that particular point of time, Ranga talked about passion. That was the main thing which was there. We didn't have a target market. We didn't know whose problem we were solving. We were just understanding, spending time in the marketplace, trying out various iterations of how the problem which we were solving was, luckily for us, big, which now I'm looking back and trying to put a framework around any of you who are thinking of building products. So that comes to the first question, where anybody who is trying to build products, or even it is applicable equally for services, are you solving a problem which is large enough? From title of your center, it seems to be clean water is going to be a challenging proposition, and you are, from luckily for all of you, the problem or that question seems to be answered. That is, no, you are problem solving or you can potentially solve a problem which is large enough and which is relevant, which affects many. Second question, which is where I would suggest that some of you might want to spend a lot of time in terms of looking at is the solution right for the target market. Ranga also talked about whose problem are you solving. Not only whose problem are you solving, is it right? Is it able to deliver the expected results? I will relate to, when you are looking at Maveric and what Ranga talked about, as well as to some product which I have built also, is because, the moment two things happened when, what Ranga talked about in the initial six years, once QE was identified and taken to a set of users who immediately found the value, which is, in these days, people might jargonize it as product market fix and various other places. But primarily, you are asking the question saying that, is my solution right for getting that promised large value? If as entrepreneurs, you need to initial part, you will spend a lot of time looking at that. And third question also along with that is relevant, which is, are you the people to solve the problem? Or even to say that, do you have all the expertise to solve the problem? At times, which in some venture capitalists it called, do you have a gene pool deficit is what they call in the Valley. But what basically it means is, do you have an all-round team? Which I'm sure Ranga will touch upon more when he's answering the question. It is not enough to have a bunch of people from the same walk of life thinking together in the same direction, in the same dimension. So you need a mix of people, and what is that team going to accentuate? While we know that in India, because of our investment in education, personally, in terms of in the private sector as well as in the public sector, when you're looking at IT or when you're looking at from a Mavericks class, there is a lot of raw talent which is available. Now the question is, how will we create? What's the value add we are creating for it to be an advantageous, which puts us in an advantageous position in front of the customer and for the customer, which is very important as your product market fitment. So that in the first part where I talked about an information platform, where even MSN and Yahoo, when they came, they went through the platform which I was fortunate to build. in terms of, and we had around 35% of retail e-broking traffic going through the SaaS product, which we had built long back. And there, when I linked these three questions at that particular point of time, a lot of retail investors were getting into the market who didn't have information. They were starving for information. So when you could provide it using the new technology, which is in a similar place, maybe for some of you, newer viable technologies are available to solve the large problem. And the solution, we could convert it in a manner in which individual investors with limited financial knowledge could digest. So in your case, it might be, I'm not an expert to be able to guess that for you, but can surely facilitate with appropriate questions, not with answers. And then we were the people, because we understood all the math or stat or financial thinking or business thinking behind when you're evaluating an investment and those aspects of that we could convert, we could package. Then comes the most important part. Many startups, I have been interacting, at least having dialogues with many startups, they cover these three steps. In the next step is where, where they have, fail. Even when you're looking at phenomenal successes like, Paytm, which created an industry, still is waiting to be a business success. That comes in from what is the business model in which you are providing your solution to customer, right? Most of the models, if you really look at Facebook, which recently is facing a lot of headwind, is not because they do have technology, they are solving a large problem, they don't have any deficit in terms of expertise, but getting into a tough spot in terms of the business model. While when it was working, they were working in the fringe, for example, in where legally it was not very clear. So in terms of that need to be very clear. Can you operate in that space, and then what is the model in which you are earning your revenues? So that part, even many of them have solved. And the next part also, many of them fall back. If you look at the entire payment spectrum, while there are beautiful technology created by passionate technologists, including Paytm, including various other people, now what has happened is all of them have business models which are not defendable. And suddenly the technology becomes a commodity. So at that particular point of time, making your success, making you successful is business success is coming as a challenge, even whether it is scaling in various places. So we had very simple model as a pay as you use, or pay per each transaction which you are registering, which was very small. At the same time, it was covering all our costs, and we could just go in and kill all the competition which was out there. And thereafter comes, typically you need to also understand the life cycle, and you need to, what Ranga talked about, we started 3 new services. It is not because our existing service is not capable of growth or not capable of continuing to deliver the value, but you need to accelerate. At that particular point of time, you look at, what the word which people use is pivoting, which basically means, can one of the things remain common? Either my target market remains common, or my service remains, or service and expertise remains common, or the problem I'm solving remains the same. So, if there are more than one the same, then it's good. Companies either, or solutions either can enter new geographies, or you take new solution to the same geography, same customer, or you solve the same problem in other areas. So we went and solved some of the information asymmetry problems in e-governance, for example, where we had some success. So similarly, I've been part of teams which have done it for home sales in US, where after the 2008, there was a typical problem of lot of houses were available in the market. And we initially started off as a listing service, but then we could, again, you can pass it through the same sieve. We were solving a big problem. The solution was right. The company was operating in that space for around 10 years, 15 years. So we understood the market. we were already entrenched in the market and it was a new solution. Now it is a listed company called Hubsu, and the initial product I was able to decide. And I've been involved not only with only successes, not so successful things also, where we created what I would consider as very good an analytics middleware. While first three problems were very good, but the business model was difficult. My partners are still trying to figure out, breaking into various iterations, and then continue to have the same set of challenges. So in a nutshell, if you find a big enough problem, even getting 2-3% market size, market share will make you a big success. And in Maveric's case, while we are large number when you look at it from a standalone business perspective, but we are tiny. We are operating in a very large problem domain. Are we providing solutions which are right to the market? We have most of our contracts are repeat. We punch way above people in the weight category. We have won successfully projects competing against large IT service providers and continuing to do so. Are we the people? Yes, that is what our customers will tell, saying that these people differentiate not only with expertise but with passion. They will ensure that the project crosses the line. And do we have a business model? Yes, we do have a business model. We are fairly profitable. Entire growth is being funded by internal cash flows and continuing to do so. And we are in the process of actually improving the business model in terms of trying to do solutions, which is what I try to do primarily, moving away from only providing expertise and service. Can we provide service through a platform or solution? So we are ticking the right boxes, and that is the reason why we took some time to build, which I will bring in the one last part for some of you who are trying to solve problems or trying to be entrepreneurs. At times it takes a little bit of time. Patience is one of the virtues, which is a very good tool or a good weapon you need to have. I'll pause here, and if there are any questions related to thinking through these aspects of what solutions, what products, understanding how product market fits, and also limited, I have had my share of time in front of the VCs. Sure, Ranga also can, he can put in more answers to that, but I will try to remain more on the product and solution and how to package it, what methodologies, what structures and frameworks you can use. I'll stop here and we can get into Q&A, I think. Ranga, back to you.
First question, which we are having from Remco's Technologies, how do you see the process validation and performance while doing the scaling for medical device?
Medical device. As long as you give me the leverage to be not an expert in medical devices. So the process for scaling is, first thing is, what is the value that you're creating in comparison to your competition is the first question. Number one, many a times we don't know the competition. If you know, like for example, who are the three people who you're competing with? And in terms of those three specific competitors, how does your customer perceive the value you are offering differently as compared to somebody else? If you are clear about that, then when you are in a position to articulate that in about, say, less than 2-3 minutes, and you say that to a prospect, is he taking notes? This is what it is. My personal, the way I validate is, if a client takes some notes, it means that there is something in what I'm saying. Or if the client asks questions either related to usability, like, okay, you're saying all that, but how long does it take to implement? Or how long does it actually, what are the complexities related to, getting, which are the parties I need to actually get together and get consent in order to implement this. The minute he inquires about, once he hears the value that I'm offering in comparison to competition, if he actually gets into more details related to how does it get implemented, is there ease of adoption, then it means that I have something really of value to the customer. So that's the first premise, that I actually have some value to offer. And number two is, what is the ease with which I'm in a position to help the customer to make a buying decision? Many a times, the customer's buying decision process is something that is a little opaque. And that's a big problem, because if you don't have the customer's buying process in mind, then you don't know what's happening, and you wait for an answer, and that answer may come after 9 months as no, versus you actually know the steps involved in the buying process, and you're in a position to either have a clarity as to which step you are in, or more importantly, if you are capable, if you know how to shorten the process, then it means you have something more to make yourself a winner. So first thing is the value. Second thing is in the buying process. And the third thing is actually ability to have, a large customer outreach. These are all things that will actually tell you whether if you are ready to, your service is ready to scale, or your customers are ready to buy in scale. So I would actually go in terms of looking at number one, in comparison to competition, how is the customer perceiving the value, not the entrepreneur? Number two, do I have a full clarity with regard to telling my value in 5 minutes time? The people call it as an elevator pitch. Elevator pitch to a VC is altogether different. The elevator pitch to a user is totally different. And once you do that elevator pitch to the user, if he's actually getting you to talk more about adaptation in terms of the complexity of adapting your solution or product, then it means that you're making sense. And then you are going to look in terms of, do I have clarity on his buying process, or is it opaque? If it is clear, and then subsequently, if you have a mechanism to shorten it, then you are going to be having a better ability to see that you are very close to having a service that is scalable. I don't know whether if I have answered your question in the context of medical devices, but mostly in the kind of work that we do, this is what we follow, please. Murali, anything to add there?
No, I think you've nothing more to add there, Ranga.
Yeah.
So the next question is from Inuit, Mr. Prem. So he has asked, can you kindly reiterate on the key differences between customer value and enterprise value?
Okay. I'll just add one more point to the previous question. See, one of my friends who studied with me in Gindi by name Nandagopal actually he worked with Philips, and at this point of time, he has his own firm doing biomedical equipment. And he actually tells me one more principle with regard to scale. If a reseller is willing to bite my product, so the other thing that I hear Nandu telling is that, I went with these products, there is no reseller really willing to risk. So the other thing that I've heard, especially in the medical devices thing, is that, how are you in a position to actually get a reseller understand your product's value and its difference in comparison to the competitor product? So sometimes customer, and Nandu normally says, I can't reach all the customers. So if I can get the right resellers to actually see value in my offering, that's another way to assess whether if the product is really worth its salt, and then is it having a potential to scale. This is related to the previous question.
No, and just to add to that, Ranga, from the IT or from the mobile industry, or if is your process alone or whatever the IP alone, it need not be, if it is whether it's hardware, is your design can be provided to people on which people build devices. Android is an example, or your RISC devices, which most of the chip manufacturers use, is possible. But that is hyperscale, but that might be a possibility, saying that our can you provide the IP on a license mode? And there are people who will take, that might be next step after you say that there are resellers, there are people who build using your technology inside Intel Inside equivalent, or even your technology inside kind of a model.
Sure. So the second question was a little more elaboration on the difference between the customer value and the enterprise value. Murali, you want to take the same Paytm and explain a little?
Yeah. For example, you look at Paytm. I think most of you will agree that Paytm is a big success. And the question is, big success for whom? Big success for the customer, for the people who are using technology. In earlier days, you took the phone, but you forgot your wallet, or you forgot your card, or even you forgot to pay your card on time, something of that sort. You can get stuck. Now it is a piece of technology which is ever pervasive, in the sense that even you can, people are buying, they show it in the advertisement, and it is actually possible. You can buy a single banana through digital payment, right? It is available even at the local vendor. But when you really look at it from the kind of money they're sinking in to make this technology, which might be lower, but to market it and to stay in the market, because they created a proposition which is extremely valuable, but what I will call it as not defendable. So at times, even becoming a market leader will give customers a lot of value, even the market a lot of value, but does the enterprise, this is what I was talking about, business model. I don't know whether they could have defended using a patent or using a copyright, whatever, which some of the advanced economy companies do well. Whether you look at it in the same payment space, Visa or Master, they also create by various aspects. In the sense that customer value is primarily about, is customers' problem getting resolved well? In Paytm case, I am yet to see people saying that, no, this is a bad technology, it's not solving my problem. Almost for everyone, including the merchant, the banks, or the people, it is solving. But is it going to add phenomenal business success for the enterprise? It is still not there. Jury is still out. They can still make a comeback. They can do something, some piece of technology. But if you really look at it, PhonePe, which is the competitor, or various other payments, whether it's GPay, Amazon Pay, and each of the banks have come back with similar kind of technology. We help some of those banks.
Yeah, I'll add to that. From Maveric's own experience, when we started in 2002, June, we identified 3 services. We said the entire software technology, the delivery could be far improved if you know domain. And we also said that if there is a strong project management, you would be in a position to actually accomplish the objectives on time, on budget. And then we said, this quality is actually something that you should actually be building into the process, rather than trying to do after finishing the product as a, what do you call, like in manufacturing, there is something called, a QC at the end of like assembly. And there is also a QC which is in process. So we said quality should be in process rather than, in batch process at the end of the manufacturing. So we took 3 services, went to market. We did we got acceptance on project management. We got acceptance on requirements management. We also got acceptance in software quality. So what happened is that there was a reasonable acceptance in project management and requirements management, but we could never get scale. Basically, for every 100-member project, there probably were 3 project managers or 4 project managers. And client always liked to have at least the half of the project managers as part of his team members. So we could get a 2-member team for a 100-member software project. And especially in requirement management on a project that was actually 18 months in duration or 6 months in duration, my business analyst worked only for 1 month. So means that my business analysts, every alternate month, I need to find them a new project. In the absence of that, I was not able to utilize them. Does customer see value in actually Maveric offering requirements management with the in-depth knowledge of retail, corporate, and wealth management? Yes. But is it possible for me to use a 100-member team and keep them utilized with at least 18% of the time? No. So there is a customer value on one side, but enterprise value with regard to requirements management was the least. Project management was okay, but not scalable because there are only 4 project managers for a 100-member team. In that, half of them were actually customers' own full-time employees. So as a consulting company, I had very limited scalability on project management, but utilization was good. So I guess that you are understanding. In requirements management, I had no scale, no utilization, or low utilization. In project management, I had good utilization, but low scale. But when it came to quality, there was like a very high scalability, very high utilization, and also very high perceived value. So naturally, that's one thing that actually gave enterprise value, while all 3 services were able to offer customer value. That's how I'm trying to explain from my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
So we have one more question. What challenges are key from the organization culture perspective across the stages, especially at scale stage?
Okay. See, the scale stage, you normally have a lot of new leaders coming on board. At the scale stage, there is no situation or there is no example that I can think of wherein the core team, the original creators, would probably be less than 20%. And 80% of them would probably be some new leaders who have come from various fields of walks of life. So the first thing is to actually get them to have some sort of a common ground is the biggest challenge that I have experienced, not only in Maveric. In my earlier career as I was a consultant, I did work with a lot of IT companies between early 90s and almost up to 2002, even after starting Maveric. So in the scale stage, the biggest issue is that of how do you get a diverse group of leaders who have come from different walks of life to have some common ground. And recently, like even yesterday, my team was talking, how do you get them aligned on the how rather than what? How do you get them aligned on how? Because see, the detail, the devil is in the detail, and the detail is in the how rather than what. What to do, more or less, everybody has a common agreement. I want to be this, or we need to reach this goal on revenue or this goal on market share. What is usually much easier to align people with, but on the operating principles, which I call as how, it's damn difficult to actually get people to be aligned. For example, in the early stages, one of the operating principles is no functions. When you're actually creating that market service fit, or when you're actually doing the initial, establishing the customer value, normal tendency is to say that we work as a team. There are no functions, and each one is actually contributing his own way to establish that market service fit, and then also to try to create a value for the customer. But as you grow, naturally the functions will come, and the functions are necessary. At the same time, you need to integrate them. So they come from different walks of life. They are specialists in their own field, and specialists normally have a very strong mind in terms of how they think is the right way to do, and then how do you integrate them and get them to have a common ground with regard to at least some 10 operating principles is the toughest thing that I have seen at Maverick, and I've also seen earlier when I was in consulting. So to that extent, how do you get 10 people to have some common ground on how do we actually operate as a company or operate as a team, operate with the customer? I had a person who really did a very good job in sales. And at a point of time, we used to do a lot of fixed bid projects, fixed time, fixed cost projects. So he would tell me, I don't want to show the customer any detail with regard to estimates because it's a fixed time, fixed cost. If he likes the price, he will buy. If he doesn't like the price, he doesn't buy. And I'm not answerable in terms of how much effort I'm putting there. Now, the customer gets confidence by actually looking at your work when work breakdown. And when you give the work breakdown, somewhere the other effort gets exposed. So the sales leader of mine would actually refuse to show work breakdown to the customer, saying that I'll just put timeline and I'll put deliverables. And now you want to buy, you buy, otherwise you don't buy. And at the same time, like he would actually tell the customer that, like on these milestones, you need to pay such and such amounts. So most customers found that to be very opaque. And there was a big struggle within the team to actually tell my sales leader, I don't have a problem in actually exposing my work breakdown. And even if the customer has some sense of effort getting understood through that work breakdown, it's okay. So what I'm saying is some specialists come with some strong mind, and to get them to have a common ground is going to be the biggest job of the leader out there. And many a times, if you are lucky, there will be more than one person doing that integration job. If it happens that you are the only guy doing the integration job, it means that you are in trouble. You are in trouble. Many a times, they will be listening and they'll be expecting only the leader out there to be the integrator or to make sense of things rather than each one participating and trying to influence the other in a way to build a common ground. So cultivate more and more people to integrate ideas rather than just leave them to state their idea and not take any further trouble and leave all the trouble of integrating to one or two individuals at the top of the hierarchy is a bad scenario. If you can promote more and more people to have an ability to integrate, that is a better scenario. So that is the biggest cultural challenge that I've seen. The other thing is you lose touch with people. You lose touch with customer. As you grow and scale, the biggest fear of an entrepreneur is that I'm losing touch with people. I'm losing touch with the customer. I would say losing touch with the customer is a sacrilege. You can never, if you really want to be a good leader, especially an entrepreneur, the biggest mistake you could be doing is to lose touch with the customer. Even if you have a little distance from your own team, that is still pardonable. It is only pardonable. I'm not saying it's okay. But to lose touch with the customer is unpardonable. So first thing is, how do you integrate these diverse specialists? Second thing is, how do you still build systems by which you actually are in touch with your customer and also in touch with the key functionaries, key people within your own system? This is what comes to my mind. Murali, anything on cultural issues of scaling?
No, fully in, I think you have covered mostly. So again, to put it in a kind of a framework, which is not an original idea, which I heard from an extremely successful entrepreneur who was chairman of a company where I worked. He had grown it to, he had built a pharma company and exited with $1 billion valuation. So he was talking about what Ranga echoed, in 4 stages he was talking about. Initially, when you're starting, you put a premium on loyalty. He says you are not even sure whether, this idea everybody is commonly sharing, and that is where it will be focused on, and which he was putting in his industry with this can change from industry to industry. He was saying that first 50 crores is a difficult target. You will end up as a core mover as an entrepreneur, founder, co-founder. You will end up doing a lot of that. And you will primarily focus on, you will empower people whom you are sure that they will show up, they are sharing the responsibility. And thereafter, the growth depends on amongst the founders or amongst the new leaders who are coming up either from inside or otherwise. They need to be entrepreneurial. They need to, and then you will start sharing some of the operational and those aspects, and that is the first change. And if loyalty alone is used as a measure, there is a challenge which comes up. And that takes you to, in the pharma industry, according to him, that might take you up to 150, even at times to 200 crores. You might have 4 divisions or 3 divisions, 3 formulations, whatever it may be, and which is taking you to that level. And thereafter comes in the process based or function based, as Ranga was talking about, in the sense that some are some processes which need to be streamlined, centralized. It could be HR, it could be accounting, it could be pricing, whatever that may be, CRM, whatever the process may be. It might differ from company to company, and you're trying to manage it with metrics and those aspects. Then last stage, when you have gone past 300 crores, 400 crores, the founders, or they start focusing more. They need to start focusing more on investing for growth and focusing on those investment, because by that time you already have set processes, whether it is for budgeting, estimation, business reviews, various other aspects. And last process is to create a stronger board. You are investing in that industry, R&D investment and new formulations and those things, which I think is applicable for any business. And of course, I completely agree. The first reason for coming to office is the customer, and that at whatever level doesn't go. Just to share an anecdote about old man Oberoi. Oberoi hotels are valued as the best hotels ever. Apparently, even when he was 85, he was chairman of the board. Only one thing he used to do in office. Apparently, in each hotel, there is a place where you can drop in your grievances. The old man, though there are no grievances, a well-run hotel. If any of them, even a single one of them comes his way, he was so dejected and irritated till that is solved, and he used to personally send regret notes. And that is extremely critical, whichever the industry, whether it's high tech, low tech, whatever the case may be. And that is the constant within growth. Other places, depending on this 4-stage growth, in some industries it might be 3. Is depending on where you are, considering your maybe most of you are in the early stage. It is a shared vision and common ownership. The camaraderie and the teaming is the most important aspect, whether it is tribal or whichever the culture part, that need to be shared. The common goal need to be shared. I'm not saying that you need to shed it when you're going to the next level, but thereafter we need to start leaning on each other's shoulders. Thereafter things will become extremely formal, and then it is a scaled model where it need to work like clockwork. Back to you, Ranga.
That's good. Any other questions? Maybe another 1 or 2. And I have one question at the end, and that's about learning your biggest blunder. Anybody can share their biggest blunder. I'll also share mine. That is for the last, but any other questions?
There are none. I have a question, Ranga.
Yeah, please.
I have a question which always puzzled me. You talked about customer value and enterprise value, and Paytm was a good example where customer value was high, probably enterprise value was not that high. But several startups become unicorns and they don't make money, but they are generally not bothered about profits. They just show customers growth, and the valuation keeps going up, and investors keep on investing in those startups. So what is this myth all about, and What are your views on this?
See, I'll take you back to, manufacturing to begin with, and then bring you back here. So way back in 90s, when Whirlpool came into India, the first thing they tried to do is actually try to see how to get the maximum capacity in compressors and maximum capacity in the box. The box means the fridge. So the minute you actually captured, or you just said that I've got, installed capacity of 80% of the market demand for compressors with me, and installed capacity of 70% or 60% of the white good, that is the refrigerator manufacturing capacity with me, it meant that nobody else is going to enter India at that time.
Okay.
So what they did is that actually brought a kind of a investment and created a total entry barrier. And entry barrier is not because they already have the market share. They only have an installed capacity, which is almost up to 60% of the refrigerator and 80% of the compressor. Now they're actually telling others to get away from that investment, because once this is committed investment, nobody else would think of making that investment in India. They may probably do it elsewhere. I see a parallel to that in the way that we are actually talking about some of the unicorns, if not all of them, wherein you're actually saying that, my investment is something that actually makes me the top 3 players. So one is you create a platform that is such highly scalable, and then subsequently say that because I have the highly scalable platform backed by a certain quantity of investment, I'm likely to be the top 3 player. And they play with the future cash flow rather than, the liquidity. They actually play the future cash flow. Discounted cash flow model is something that they actually play. So I would say that for every 10 unicorns, probably 3 of them still would have a solid discounted cash flow potential. And the problem would be more of execution rather than strategy. The other 7 may have there could be suspects there in the remaining 7. So in the edutech itself, if you take, so the top 3 would probably, top 5, so to say, would still be something that would have some credible financial projections based on which they're actually being funded. And once again, in the 5, who becomes the top 3, and how is it that I become the top 3 and thus secure my position? How much does it cost? Those are the kind of games that top 5 would probably play. And that's the reason Ronnie Screwvala thought that I'm a simple man and I should exit edutech, and he exited, And the remaining 15 would also be playing, the back end of the 15 would also be playing a game at a point of time that they would probably get picked up by the VCs and thus get moved into the top 5. So from that angle, that unicorn business is not something I'm fully understood. I'm only trying to make a parallel with what I understood in the old economy.
Right.
So entry barrier is what you create, or you actually create, ability to capture market share.
In a physical product, entry barriers may be easier to create because it's a physical product. In a digital thing, it can just evaporate overnight, isn't it? So that risk may still be there. Anybody can come and make a digital product, and there's no physical asset to consider.
No, the capital is very physical. Money is very, 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 very credible. So it's a question of, like if you really have that kind of a backing, you are definitely having a firepower to be in the market for the longest period of time. I think some of them also think it's a question of staying power. It's a question of staying power and trying others to stay versus you stay for a longer period of time. And at the same time, they would also be looking at some sort of a financial model wherein they are making, at least quarter on quarter, they need to show, or year on year, they need to show progress with regard to earnings, which they would be bothered equally. It's not that they're not bothered about earnings. They are bothered about earnings. but probably they would get a 8 to 10 year window before they really become break even. For you and me, especially coming from manufacturing and services, maybe a 3-year window is what is provided at best. They would probably get 8 to 10 year window before they become financially viable.
Great, thanks.
Murali, any views on unicorns?
No, that is, jury is still out. If you look at Paytm, whatever is Mr. Nandakumar is talking about is what is being played. They were the first mover. They had this huge followers, or huge number of people who are coming in and into as customers as well as merchants. Almost at some point of time, I think 6 out of 10 transactions, digital transactions, were going through them, which has exactly happened what you were talking about, Mr. Nandakumar, in the sense that PhonePe came, Amazon Pay couldn't, for whatever reason, though it is easy to use, but Google Pay is becoming popular. And what Ranga was talking about, it is becoming last man standing, will take all the markets. But there have been, if you're looking at some of the other digital places, they have been, even before Facebook came, even market leader Google had Orkut or some of those things, which were there, sunk in a lot of money and had to be not so great or even. So yes, there is higher mortality which is there, but what I'm starting to see is the investors in top 3-4 of them tend to be common, in the sense that they are not betting necessarily on one winner. They are betting on the trend. I'm betting
on a place, not on the winner. They want to bet on place or something, right?
That's right. Even you start seeing that in metaverse. I think similar set of investors will be there in both Zomato, and it is not either Zomato or Swiggy. It is Zomato and Swiggy. So, and at some point of time, one becomes smaller, they might even try to merge. But what they're saying is, this is a trend I'm betting on, because people will surely move to digital, and that trend is worth betting on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. So, Ranga, you had an interesting ending for this.
Yeah, in terms of, I just wanted to inquire from people in terms of what they thought or what they think has been their biggest blunder so far as entrepreneurs. I'll also share mine at a point of time before we end the call. But this is not something like, if you feel comfortable, you can share it. So anybody wanting to share their blunder?
Let me give you my blunder. I don't know if I'm an entrepreneur or I should consider myself an entrepreneur, but when I quit the corporate world, I said, let me start my own consulting firm. Okay, just dabbling with. So the very first, proposal I submitted to a client. I knew him very well when I was in ITC where I was working, and we had good relationships. And so I said, now let me consult him on his business. So I went and gave him a proposal, which I thought if I price it low, then I'm undervaluing myself and he will not take me seriously. So I priced it pretty high. And that sort of put him off, I think. Okay. So I didn't lose a friend, but I lost a business potential there. So that was my first learning, that when you're not in an organization and you're coming out and are on your own, then you really don't have, your background may be something, but you are on your own and you have to now prove yourself from scratch.
Yeah.
And maybe better to start small and make that guy find you good, and then you can. I think it was a blunder. So
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Brave of you to say or share your blunder.
I continue to do one blunder, which is pick up. This happened when I was, just like Mr. Nandakumar, I also left Tesco and then started consulting. So somebody introduced me to company which was into data centers based out of New Zealand. They wanted something to be built in the software side. I said, okay, I'll pick it up, let me do. And they said, time and material or fixed cost. So I said fixed cost. And then in the subsequent meetings, the deal came to me. They didn't bat an eyelid. I did exactly the other way. I might have gone the other way around, Mr. Nandakumar. I said, whatever I said was low, ridiculously low. They haven't outsourced to India, so it would have been ridiculously low. I thought I was making my corporate earnings from one project, so I will continue. And in a couple of meetings with the CTO, I started giving a lot of ideas. And when you give ideas and you are the vendor, it is your work which is increasing. I'm not ideating to make it, this goes back to that customer value and enterprise value. Customer is getting a lot of value and enterprise value. I started working really hard, and that is when it struck me, saying that, hey, while playing a technologist role inside a corporate and providing a lot of value add and to extracting work out of that, you need to have to have some kind of, the person was impressed. He wanted me to provide him some 10-member team from India and be a co-developer and things like that. By that time I said, I need to understand a little bit more about this particular business. I don't think I have understood it fully. Learned quite a lot from those, the commercial angle, which I was, though I might have had the fundamentals right, but I was not a practitioner on that side, and learned quite a lot. Now the first question asking is, what is the business model? What is the viability? Then you get excited about technology. Otherwise, you get some of the people here, who are technocrats who are trying to run business. When engineers try to run business, it might be an engineering success for sure. Making it a business success is another story. And we learn on the way, but if we take long time to learn, it becomes much more expensive than any education you have ever received.
True. Yeah. So anybody else from the larger audience? As we're also nearing time, maybe one person could share, and then I'll share, and we could wrap up the day. Any participant? Okay. So do I take that you have not done any blunder yet? That's good to hear. So yeah, please.
So last month I was presenting to a panel of our last 2 years of work. But the blunder we did was that we were not prepared to talk about the technical details. Okay, so it was a very short pitch, and there was also Q&A. But as they asked into the technical details and they want to see the results, right, like we were fumbling and we couldn't show it in that meeting itself. That was the biggest blunder, because now we got to wait for another 4 or 6 months to get that chance again.
Okay. That's good. That's good to hear. See, when I relate to the thing is that, many times when I look back, somewhere about 7 to 8 years into Maveric, we were almost willing to hang the boot. Basically, there is a time you come to your lowest ebb. And many a times the lowest ebb does come from multiple angles. Either, your own customer is not still fully appreciative, or so the customer value normally happens much earlier than enterprise value troubles you. So whenever there is a shift in the phase of your own enterprise, in that cusp comes a lot of impatience, and many entrepreneurs normally get out or make mistakes in that period. For example, in 2008, after having scaled one service to a global level, we're being called from some places in Europe, we were being called from some places in the US to come and deliver that service. It was not being sold. It was actually word of mouth was selling, and we were getting a lot of demand. But only thing is, you have done it. It is running in a particular phase. As an entrepreneur, you want to be under challenge, under trouble, under pressure. So when things are going good, you normally try to be a monkey and you try to buy trouble. So at that point of time, we were thinking that we would actually go into education, that we'll actually create, an MS course along with Laila College in Chennai, and offer some kind of a software MBA, like management technology together. So normally when things are going good and you want to pick up additional challenge, you try to actually use your passion or things that you like and try to bring them into the business. Business is to service the customer. Business is not to service your own passions. Your own passions in terms of your own, hobbies. There was also, so we were people in management consulting at that point of time. So education, research, or teaching, college was a kind of thing that we liked. So we were trying to actually digress. And we almost digressed. We also went into collaboration with Liba and started doing a course for Maverick. And then we thought that we'll offer it to public. Then we thought that we will create a university or some kind of a postgraduate institute. So that was the biggest blunder we just about almost committed to and pulled back. If we had done that, we would have never retained the focus on the kind of service that we scaled subsequently after 3 years or 4 years. So many a times what happens is there is a phase wherein the entrepreneur feels there is less challenge. And at that point of time, he tries to include certain things into the agenda, which are not specifically focused on the customer, but it is focused on satiating his own likes or his own fancies. So that is the biggest blunder one could be doing. That specifically in Maverick case, we almost committed, and thanks to 1 or 2 board members, we got out of it. If I go generic and tell, as Murali just pointed out, impatience is definitely a kind of the worst thing that can actually happen to a entrepreneur. So entrepreneur is the one who needs to actually brood rather than be impatient. And timing is another thing that an entrepreneur need to really evaluate, because many a times success has equal contribution from the timing. So impatience, timing, and the third one, this saying is something that I always remember. It is not my cup of tea. I have a colleague by name Venkatesh, who's been with me for the last 21 years. And he is capable of actually advising Mr. Ambani. He did advise big sheikhs in the Middle East in the early part of his career on millions of dollars of investment in US. So he normally comes with an idea which probably is good, but it is not something that we can back up. We can fund and support. So anytime you get an idea, first thing that you need to examine is it my cup of tea or not? Because all ideas are not my cup of tea. All opportunities are not my cup of tea. So to that extent, be very careful whether if this opportunity is something that you and your team can really back up. If not, stay back. Tell somebody else who can do that and leave it there. Before that, timing. When is it that you do a particular thing? Like, for example, in order to move from 1 service to 4 services, we were looking at 2012 onwards for timing, and only in 2016 we could execute it. So waiting on the timing is also something that you need to practice. Otherwise, you could make a lot of mistakes there. And the first thing is in terms of don't bring your hobbies into business agenda. These are the things I have learned over the 20-year period, but I'm sure that many of you have something in your mind. Would be glad to hear one of these days, either online or otherwise. Thank you very much for giving us the time and letting us share our own experience and mind, and wish each one of you the very best. And I'm sure you will be in a position to satisfy your customer, build enterprise value, and also get to a stage of enjoying scaling. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Ranga.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ranga sir. Thank you, Murali sir, for taking your time off to engage with all of the startups. This was really an engaging session. So I think all the participants has benefited from this. And thank you so much, all the participants. Thank you, sir.